I've never been a natural athlete, but I've always appreciated a good, sweat-inducing workout to keep myself in shape. My closest friend Vance is the exact opposite. He's a lean, disciplined marathon runner who basically acts as my personal drill sergeant. Because our daytime schedules were always completely packed, Vance and I fell into a strict routine of running late at night through my suburban subdivision. It was generally a very quiet, well-lit neighborhood with a low crime rate. We always felt perfectly safe there, but we hasn't laced up our running shoes in that neighborhood since a terrifying incident that happened exactly 2 months ago. To understand how we got trapped, you need to understand the layout of my neighborhood. It consists of one long, winding main loop with several small cul-de-sacs branching off it like ribs. At the furthest point of the loop, the asphalt abruptly ends and turns into a rugged fire trail that cuts through dense pine woods, eventually leading out to vast private horse pastures. One humid night, we decided to vary our route to push our stamina. We started at my driveway, took a shortcut path through the woods to reach one of the isolated cul-de-sacs, ran back up to the main loop, and planned to sprint down the dark fire trail before looping back to my house. It was a convoluted path, but our standard 3-mile loop on the paved roads was getting too monotonous. We started off strong, jogging shoulder to shoulder and just gossiping about work drama. But shortly after entering the wooded shortcut, we heard the distinct sound of heavy footfalls behind us. At first, we didn't panic. The trail was a popular spot for local hikers during the day, and seeing another late-night jogger wasn't entirely out of the ordinary. But as we pushed forward, the footsteps stayed perfectly synchronized with ours. When Vance picked up the pace to a hard sprint, the footsteps behind us accelerated. When we dropped down to a slow, deliberate walk to catch our breath, the presence behind us slowed down to match our exact rhythm. By this point, my adrenaline was spiking, but the glow of the streetlights at the end of the trail was finally in sight. The moment our sneakers hit the asphalt of the lit cul-de-sacs, we spun around to see who it was. The path behind us was completely empty. Vance and I exchanged a tense, uneasy look. We tried to laugh it off, assuming it was just some other runner playing a weird game of pacing with us. Trying to shake off the growing dread, we pushed forward, taking the main road all the way to where the streetlights ended and the dark dirt fire trail began. Even though my gut was telling me to head home right then, we felt a runner's high and decided to head down the unlit dirt road anyway. The canopy of overgrown trees completely blocked out the moonlight, creating an incredibly oppressive atmosphere. We ran about a mile into the pitch black before deciding to turn back. Just as we spun around, my headlamp caught a sudden movement. It was a tall, dark shape, darting wildly behind a thick oak tree on the left. The memory of those synchronized footsteps rushed back, and a cold sweat broke out across my neck. I grabbed Vance's shoulder and whispered that someone was hiding in the trees ahead of us. Vance scoffed, telling me the darkness and fatigue were just playing tricks on my eyes. I wanted to believe him so badly, so I forced myself to keep jogging back toward the light. We passed the oak tree without incident. But just as the paved road came back into view, a violent rustling erupted in the dry brush. Barely 20 feet behind us, we spun around, our chest lamps cutting through the dark. Standing dead center on the dirt road was a man. He was standing with his back to us. He wore a heavy, stained gray hoodie, tattered, mud-caked cargo pants, and worn-out work boots. My heart hammered so hard against my ribs I thought it would fracture. I literally couldn't breathe. Vance stepped forward, trying to sound brave, and shouted, "Hey, what's your problem?" But he was cut off by a sound that made my skin crawl. The man began to laugh. It was a high-pitched, manic, wet cackle that echoed horribly off the trees. Still laughing, the figure slowly rotated his body to face us. Then the laughter stopped instantly. He just stared. His eyes were stretched incredibly wide, showing the whites all around his dilated pupils, and his face was a deathly, pale white. That empty, predatory glare is burned into the back of my eyelids to this day. Vance and I didn't say a single word. We turned and ran faster than we ever had in our entire lives, sprinting the full 2 miles back to my house without looking back once. As we fled, that sickening cackle rose up in the distance behind us, urging us to run even faster. The moment we burst through my back door, I collapsed over the utility sink and threw up from sheer exhaustion and terror. We locked every window, bolted the doors, and sat in the dark hallway waiting for morning. We have never run at night again. If you prefer to exercise in the dark, please stick to populated roads and never go out without protection. During my junior year of high school, I was deeply committed to the varsity cross-country team. My favorite way to clear my head was running solo. I wasn't exactly the sprinter's favorite, but I possessed relentless stamina and loved zoning out to the steady, rhythmic slap of my sneakers against the gravel. To make some extra cash, I took a job walking and running a high-energy Siberian husky puppy named Rogue for a wealthy woman who lived in an isolated rural community bordering a state forest. She offered me $15 a run, which at the time felt like a jackpot. The area was beautiful but desolate. It was dotted with decaying barns, an overgrown pioneer cemetery, and the ruins of an old abandoned religious commune. My parents always warned me about training in such isolated areas, but I figured my speed was my ultimate insurance policy. I was dead wrong. It was late October. The twilight was bleeding into a deep, bruised purple, and the setting sun threw long, distorted shadows across the asphalt, making the woods look dense and impenetrable. The only sounds were my steady breathing, Rogue's rhythmic panting, and the crunch of gravel under my feet. But the further we went, the more the natural sounds of the forest seemed to die out, leaving a heavy, suffocating silence. About 2 miles from the client's house, the road narrowed into a corridor of ancient, overgrown pines. Suddenly, Rogue halted. Her ears shot forward and her entire body locked up. She stared intently into the thicket, letting out a low, terrified whimper. I followed her gaze. Hidden between 2 thick pine trunks, a man was watching us. He was short and stocky, wearing a grimy canvas cap pulled low, a heavy winter coat despite the mild autumn air, and thick leather gloves. His unblinking eyes were locked directly onto mine. The absolute stillness of his posture made my stomach turn. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he was just a local landowner or a hunter, but there was an unmistakable aura of malice radiating from him. He didn't look like someone who belonged in the woods. He looked like a predator waiting in ambush. I gave a stiff, polite nod to keep up appearances and urged Rogue back into a jog. My heart was pounding against my ribs, but we had only gone a few yards when Rogue stopped again, tucking her tail flat against her stomach. I spun around and my breath caught. The man had advanced. He was no longer hiding. He was standing right at the edge of the asphalt, only a few feet away, staring with his head tilted at an unnatural, bird-like angle. The realization hit me like a physical blow. He wanted me to see him. He was playing with me. Instinct told me to bolt, but I forced myself to maintain a steady, composed jog. If I panicked, it might trigger a chase. I kept my eyes forward, but I glanced over my shoulder every few seconds. For a moment, the road behind us looked empty. But as I turned my head back around, a flash of movement caught my left eye. I looked back. He was in a full sprint, charging directly at me. And in his gloved right hand, he held a massive, rusted butcher's cleaver. A choked gasp escaped my throat as pure, unadulterated terror flooded my nervous system. I didn't think. I just ran. The adrenaline hit my muscles like rocket fuel, and I pushed my body past any limit I had ever reached on the track. Rogue struggled to keep pace, her leash pulling taut as we flew down the dark road. I looked back once. He was gaining ground. His face was contorted into a mask of silent fury, his teeth bared. He was running with a bizarre, disjointed gait, his arms swinging wildly, his legs churning in unnatural, jerky strides, like a puppet being jerked by strings. And then, the worst realization of all hit me. He wasn't breathing. In the quiet of the country road, I could hear my own ragged gas, the heavy panting of the dog, and the wind in the trees. But from him, there was nothing. No heavy breathing, no grunts of exertion, just the terrifying rhythmic thud of his heavy boots closing the distance in absolute dead silence. We reached the edge of a residential development, and I darted wildly between 2 houses, weaving through backyards and jumping low garden fences to break his line of sight. My lungs were burning, my vision was tunneling, but I knew stopping meant death. Finally, I pulled rogue behind a plastic garden shed, pressing my back against the wall, trying to stifle my sobbing breaths. Silence. I waited, my heart drumming in my ears. Slowly, I peered around the edge of the plastic wall. At the crest of the hill, standing under the dim glow of a street lamp, the man stood watching. The heavy cleaver hung loose at his side. His chest rose and fell slowly, but his face was entirely devoid of emotion now. The rage was gone, replaced by a cold, vacant stare. A car turned the corner in the distance, its bright headlights sweeping across the yard. In the blink of an eye, the man turned on his heel and walked calmly back into the dark woods. No panic, no rush, just gone. I stayed hidden for what felt like hours before taking the most erratic, hidden route back to the client's house. My hands shook violently as I took my $15. I never told her, and I never told my parents, knowing they would instantly forbid me from ever running again. I still don't know who he was, whether a squatter from the old commune, a drifter, or something worse, but I never ran toward those woods again. The nightmare I am about to recount took place over the course of nearly 7 years. I live in a quiet, sprawling subdivision nestled in the deep farmlands of Ohio. It's a beautiful, picturesque area, but the vast fields and empty country lanes make it incredibly isolating. It was a feeling of confinement that became almost unbearable during the 2020 lockdowns. The first time I encountered the shadow was when I was 9 years old. My younger brother, who was 7 at the time, and I were walking our golden retrievers near the entrance of our subdivision, where it connects to the main state route. We were laughing and throwing sticks, completely oblivious to our surroundings. Suddenly, a voice hissed from the dark, "Hey kids, come over here for a second." A massive white SUV was idling at the shoulder of the road. The driver's side window was rolled down, and a man was leaning out, gesturing for us to approach his vehicle. I remember his features vividly. He was a tall, pale man with tight, curly blonde hair. My brother naively took a step toward the car, but my protective instincts flared. I grabbed his arm, spun us around, and marched us back toward our house. I kept looking over my shoulder. The moment the man realized we were fleeing, he hit the gas and sped away into the farmlands. When we got home, I told my mother, but she brushed it off, suggesting he was just a lost motorist looking for directions. I tried to forget about it, but the memory lingered. A year later, during Halloween, a black sedan with no license plates began slowly tailing groups of young trick-or-treaters down our street. When an angry parent stepped off the curb to confront the driver, the sedan accelerated, nearly striking him before roaring out of the neighborhood. The local parents were terrified, especially since a high-profile abduction had occurred in a neighboring county just months prior. Fast forward 4 years to the summer of 2018. Our next-door neighbors went on a 2-week trip to Europe and hired me to pet sit their elderly basset hound. I had to walk over to their house 3 times a day. Their property sat on a heavily wooded lot at the far edge of the subdivision. To get there, I could either walk the paved road or take a shortcut through a dense, overgrown patch of woods. Because the brush was full of thorns, I usually stuck to the asphalt. One night, I got distracted playing video games with my friends and realized with horror that it was past 10:30 p.m., well past the dog's final walk time. I grabbed a flashlight and ran down the dark street. Thankfully, the dog was fine. I let him out, fed him, and was about to lock up when I glanced out the front window. A black sedan was parked silently at the edge of the dark driveway, its headlights turned off. My stomach dropped. I knew for a fact the car hadn't been there when I arrived, and there were no other houses nearby. Fearing the worst, I bypassed the front door, slipped out the back, and braved the thick, thorny woods to get back to my house. I never saw the black car again that summer, but I strictly used the woods for the rest of the pet-sitting gig. I thought these were just random, isolated events until recently. As a member of my school's varsity track team, the quarantine meant I had to train alone on the empty country roads surrounding my house. I always ran on the left shoulder, facing oncoming traffic, so no vehicle could sneak up on me from behind on the blind curves. About a month ago, during my afternoon run, I noticed a vehicle matching my speed on the opposite side of the road. It was a large white SUV. It crawled along at a snail's pace, keeping perfect distance with my jog. Terrified, I took a sudden detour down a dead-end cul-de-sac. The SUV didn't follow me down the street, so I waited a few minutes and ran home. The next day, it happened again. This time, the white SUV was parked at the edge of a cornfield, pulling out to follow me the exact moment I passed. It tailed me for a mile until I utilized the same cul-de-sac trick to escape. This cat-and-mouse game continued daily for 10 days. To test if it was just a coincidence of schedules, I changed my running time by 2 hours. The first day was clear, but on the second day, the white SUV was waiting for me again. I was terrified to tell my parents because I knew they would forbid me from training, so I kept silent and tried to stay hyper-vigilant. On the 11th day, I ran down my detour cul-de-sac only to find a black sedan parked at the very end of the circle. As I drew closer, my eyes adjusted to the shadows. Curled up tightly underneath the chassis of the sedan was the silhouette of a man hiding in the dirt to avoid being seen. A wave of pure panic hit me. I spun around to run back to the main road, but the white SUV had pulled up to the entrance of the cul-de-sac, completely blocking my path. I was trapped. With no other choice, I summoned every ounce of my track training. I put my head down and launched into a full sprint directly toward the white SUV. Just as I got within 10 feet, the driver's side door flung open, and a man lunged out to grab me. My months of rigorous conditioning paid off. I dodged his reach and outpaced him easily. Realizing he couldn't catch me on foot, he screamed after me, "Stop! Come back here! I just want to talk to you." I didn't look back. I sprinted the final mile to my house at record speed, burst through the door, and told my mother everything. We called the police immediately, but without a license plate number, there was little they could do besides promise increased patrols. It has been weeks, and the terror of that afternoon still haunts my dreams. After connecting the dots, the horrifying truth is undeniable. These men have been actively hunting and attempting to abduct a child from our street for over 7 years. And the man who jumped out of the SUV to grab me? He was tall with distinct curly blonde hair. It was the exact same man who had tried to lure me into his car when I was 9 years old. Be careful when you're out alone, even in your own neighborhood. You never know who has been watching you and for how long.